Welcome to another edition of Just Unsecure. And before we go ahead, I want to say thank you to all the subscribers who hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate your support for our channel. And for all those who watch us and don't subscribe, don't forget to subscribe for this edition of the show. And for those who don't know us, my name is Babz and the co-host is
Oh, happy to be here with all of you.
Great, great. As usual, we have a studded, action packed. I know it's not a movie, but we have someone we know from Nigeria, is now based in Canada, and he did cybersecurity with us back in Nigeria. So he's on the channel today to talk about cybersecurity and risk management. And we all know that is an area that everybody wants to know more about. Oh, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't want to spoil the entire show, right? Let's bring him in.
Hey, Nurdeen, how you doing?
Very well. How are you doing, folks? Good to see you guys again.
Yes, it's been a long time, and we're happy and we are honored to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Same, yeah, same. I mean, it's always a pleasure. I mean, meeting you guys. You guys are like the OG of cybersecurity, so happy to be here and also discuss.
Oh, come on, that's nice. What do we say about you?
Then we need to say the truth. We've known you for this is almost close to what 10 years, if I'm not
20.
mistaken. So and you are one of the OGs of information and cybersecurity in Nigeria. So don't call us the OGs. So we in fact, I know I learned from you, so don't worry.
I'll take that back. I mean, I think it was still very early in the industry back then. So I think there was a whole lot of learning, collaborating. I think all those things were things I really sort of very appreciative of. I mean, it sort of developed the industries and meeting folks like you who were doing so awesomely well back then, contributing to national infrastructure. I think it was just amazing. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here and also happy to join the discourse on this channel.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I will go straight to it. Again, thanks for coming on the show. And like we always ask every great guest, which you are part of one of them, can you share your insights into the journey, how you cybersecurity and risk management, how you got to this from Nigeria to Canada? What's your insights in this field in these two countries?
I'll start with my background. My background is actually in engineering. I had nothing to do with, nothing to do with IT or cybersecurity, but I knew right from school that I was going to get into computers and all that. My final year project was actually based on a software I developed I did civil engineering. So I built like a software for doing calculations in civil engineering. That was like my final year project. I didn't practice for a single day in civil engineering, or maybe I practiced for like a month. Then I just switched into banking. I was in compliance and internal control. From there, I transitioned into IT control. I think back then, this was as far back as 2007, there-ish. I don't think there was that concept of cybersecurity, so to say. Right? It was more of IT security or IT control.
IT audit, yeah.
Yeah, so I did that for a while. I worked with some of the really OGs in the industry, right? Today, people who are like veterans in the industry, sort of worked under them. Then from there, I transitioned into consulting. So I think I spent like a good year of my life. And of course, that's how I met you guys, right? In consulting. I spent a good year of my life in consulting. And those were like the very few days when ISO standards started getting into Nigeria, 27001. I recalled I was part of the team that did one of the very first standards for one of the big banks in Nigeria. So did a number of ISO implementation. And it's been a roller coaster since then. Then got tired of consulting. I'm sure like most of you guys too also have some of the list of consulting. went into the industry, did some bit of work in oil and gas. Uh, then I came over to Canada. As in, I think my movement to Canada was sort of very. I think it's good to share this so that people would know.
Hmm.
I started working remotely from Nigeria with a company in Canada. So I worked remotely for about 3 months or thereabout. That was around during the COVID era. Then I finally traveled post COVID once the gates were clear for people to travel. So I sort of traveled, came to the job. So it was a very small company focused on building multimedia, both the hardware and the software. So I was security
Nice.
manager of the company, left there, joined the company I am today, which is more of a payment and financial industry, within payment and financial industry. And I think I also moved to the next job just last week. So
Wow. Breaking news.
no, but that's confidential. I can't say anything
Yeah.
about that job right now. But I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's it. It's been very, it's a very long journey, but smooth transitions all through. But I
Yeah.
think along that line, I think I've met lots of folks, collaborated with lots of people. I mean, lots of learning actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's a journey indeed. And the first time I met Nuruddin, it was surreal. It was like laser focused.
Ah, yeah, I remember.
It was laser focused, and I don't I'm not expecting less. Any other organization that have got Nuru to work for them, I'll count them lucky. Absolutely. The next question I'm going to ask you, right, for the benefit. Now, while you are in Nigeria, I want you to help our audience and help us to be able to transition between the two, right? What was cybersecurity like back then, or what you know now in Nigeria, compared to what it is in the Western world? That means the landscape. Do you see any kind of comparison, or somewhere is lower than the other, or what is your take?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I'll take it from two fronts. I think they're like the positives, right? And I'm sure you guys would also share into it based on some of your journey too.
Mhm.
Back then in Nigeria, I think because I was working in consulting, I had the privilege of working in supporting many organizations in different industry, mostly around the financial industry. I would say that within our financial industry today in Nigeria, I think that we have the right set of capabilities from a technology point of view. I think we invested early in some technology that the Western world today haven't gotten to that point, or maybe they got to that point later on. And I'll give you an example. We were very early in the very early days. We started doing things around ISO 27001, PCI DSS, investing in quite a number of technology solutions. Some of them after crossing over to the Western world, I felt like, as in, we got to that point very early back in Nigeria, right? So think a look at things around magnetic stripe cards. It was like years that we stopped using that. We were using chip and pin, right? But in the Western world today, magnetic stripe cards are still allowed,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
You can't find that in the Nigerian market space, as in Nigerian financial industry. Nobody would accept that. So take a look at that. And it's in all some of the subtle details in terms of even some of the technology which we implemented right back then to help us comply with standards like PCI DSS, ISO, and even before those standards came on board. I think we're doing quite well from a financial point of view, but that's just a very small industry. Taking a look at some of the other industries, I think they still have quite a lot of to catch up with the financial industry. So that's one of the things I see in terms of differentiating what we were doing back then, and this were like back then, as in
Yeah.
versus what's comparable
2011,
now.
2013. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Uh, so it's now that you're saying that. I mean, in US today, magnetic stripe card is still allowed. I mean, there are
Yeah.
things you still see that you feel like we're no longer doing this, or we stopped doing this in Nigeria, like way back. And some of technology solutions, But that being said, and I think that's one of the positives, but I think there are also quite a number of areas for, I mean, they say the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement, right?
Mm. Mm.
Yes.
I think that there are some of the areas where I wouldn't say we are lacking, but we can do better, right? One of those key areas today, what I would say, is around the regulatory framework, right? And not in terms of not having the regulation, but all actually the enforcement of the regulation.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, even though both countries are very, very similar, I can say that maybe the Western market is much more matured from a regulatory point of view. I think there's quite a bit of enforcement there. You see regulators very, very active. They go into the organizations, do the assessments, do their tests. They don't just wait for you to send them reports,
Aye.
right? So they actually do checks. I don't think we are back. We are there right then in Nigeria, or maybe within the African market. Even though there are regulations, I think that enforcement mechanism is still a bit lacking, or we can do more in terms of the enforcement mechanism. So today, I think most of our regulators would expect for you to sort of send reports to them. Maybe take a look at NITDA, for example. They expect you to send a data protection audit report, or maybe the Central Bank of Nigeria. They'll expect you to send some reports to them on an annual basis. But the regulators here are very, very active. They're hands-on. They would come into your organization and do the audits themselves. They want to see things by themselves,
Oh,
right? They would
fantastic.
expect, they would expect you to show them stuff, right? You do a presentation, you want to see things. They are more like external auditors, right? So I think that's one of the areas I feel like there's a need for improvement. And of course, the other area will be around the infrastructure market itself, or the technology and infrastructure, or the technological infrastructure. And what I mean by that is, you can't compare the availability of resources right here in the Western world with Nigeria. I mean, we
No.
all know the exchange rate right now in terms of dollar. Right, so I think they have more cash flow in terms of investing in security resources and security technology than folks in Nigeria. Most of those technologies are actually not homegrown, right? We have to
Yeah.
sort of spend some FX to import those technologies. So things around those, I mean, areas like that, where I feel like, I mean, there's still some bit of difference in uh, let me say, I won't say it's cultural difference, but in terms of from a cybersecurity point of view, there's a difference in terms of how the Western world operates and also how we operate back in Africa or Nigeria, so to say. And things around maybe cyber threat landscape. Some of there might be some subtle changes in that as a result of, I mean, threat landscape will change based on what's the target, right? I mean,
Yes.
you can't compare a developing economy to a developed economy. People would go after big industries here within the Western world. In Africa, most of the developing economies, we are still struggling. So you'd find that probably there are more activities of localized cyber criminals as compared to the Western world, where people are targeting critical infrastructure, or
Mm.
critical infrastructure is being talked out as a weapon of war, for example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, some of those subtle differences, but in the end, it's still the threat landscape. And I mean, it will change from country to country, from developed world to underdeveloped world. And I mean, hoping that Nigeria would also get there at some point in time. I'll be able to sort of compete those within the threat landscape, and also sort of fortify our security. So I think some of those areas, and there are, of course, there are much more different areas around education and awareness, and some
Hmm.
other areas like that. I feel like
I think
there's
I yeah. Please go
please go.
ahead.
I won't say
I was
there's
going to say
vast.
you hit the nail so much on the head, because for me, I I align with most of what you're saying, and I wanted to understand from a cultural perspective in terms of, I think you said something along those lines, but I wanted you to dive a little bit much more from a cultural perspective. Is there much difference? Do you see what are the misconceptions about cybersecurity and risk management,
Hmm.
especially from a cultural perspective, that you see,
Hmm.
or you can tell us about? Yes.
Yeah. Maybe one of the other key areas that I would say I've noticed really is from a talent point of view, right? So maybe take it as around training, education, and awareness. And one of the vast difference, I'll say maybe one of the vast difference I've seen is you would find folks which are actually specialized in specific areas of cybersecurity within the Western world, right? And that became immediately obvious to me.
Mm.
Within the space I work, I mean, I've met folks who are like cryptologists, as in they focused on cryptography, and that's
That
all they
is
do. And they know the in and out. Yeah, they
wow.
know the in and out of it. As in, you find folks who are only focused on identity and access management, and that's all they do. They don't do anything else other than identity and access management, or even security education and awareness, and that's all they do.
Yeah.
Back home, you have to be like jack of all trades. you have to
Absolutely.
you have to do everything. I think that also helps us transitioning into the Western world because I mean you could
Correct.
almost put into any area. You might not know the depth of it, but in terms of the breadth of the area of cybersecurity, I think we are very, very vast. You could talk about any area. You could talk about PKI. I mean,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
Babs is like a PKI fan. We used to have a lot of discussions around PKI, public key infrastructure. Yeah, so you could talk about it, but when it now comes to the actual in depth, talking about some of the other areas around crypto and all that, you'd find people in the Western world they are like nerds, right?
Exactly.
Just to them.
Yeah.
Same around identity
Yeah.
access management, incident management, detection and response. So I think that's one of the areas where we find that there's a vast difference. But that's also changing back in Nigeria because I've met folks who are like focused on, I think as far back as maybe 2017. I mean, there was a team I was part of. I'm sure that you guys are also aware of the Niger Sec Force. We had a conference then. There was a guy within our team back then that was focused on digital forensics. He knew the in and out of
Whoa.
forensics. Yeah. He's now with First Bank. Maybe honorable mention to him. He knew the in and out of forensics. And we started playing CTFs back then too. So I could find out that there are individual people who actually have specialized skills in. There's a guy also working with Paystack. He's now in Portugal. He was doing reverse engineering during our CTFs. So there are people like that, but I think we need to sort of have more homegrown people that are
Yeah.
specialized in all those specific areas. And I mean, they know the in and out of cybersecurity. And like I said, I'm glad what you guys are doing. I feel like this is one of the ways of sort of reinforcing some of those knowledge into those key areas. And of course, there are some of the myths. I know that Babs mentioned some of those things. There are some of the myths which I mean, I think it's everywhere, whether in developing world, whether in Nigeria, whether in Western world. So things around compliance does not equal security. Those are like the first things we knew, right? I think
Yep.
that's everywhere. It's
Spot
cultural.
on.
Yeah, it's cultural. So you find in the Western world, same approach to compliance is the same way people approach compliance in Nigeria. Some, let me not generalize, some companies approach compliance. So of course, compliance does not equal security. I mean, there are a number of other myths too. I think back then too, there was things around getting more tools, right? We feel like more tools equal better protection, right? That the more tools you have, the more protection you have, right?
Protection, yeah. And then you just have a lot of tools that probably are not even talking to one another.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think some of those things are things that when you reflect back on, I mean, like it's still happening today, whether in developing world or whether in the developed world. I think, which is why I said there's no major cultural difference in terms of how we approach cybersecurity, other than some of the areas around availability of resources or spend, some of the things around talented folks within cybersecurity, and of course things around regulatory framework and also government participation in security. I think we are beginning to see that too within Nigeria and also Africa. So things around some of those things around more protection, and we'll probably get into some of those other details. I mean, I would love to also
Yeah.
speak about uh, I mean, there's the concept of risk quantification, right? That if
So
you put up too
uh,
more risk.
that's the exact question I wanted to ask. Like, how for everybody that's that listening to us right now, there are many things we've thrown out, and probably they are still not at that level in cybersecurity yet. And the question they're asking, Neuro is a data protection risk. What is it? What is it talking about? So I'll like you to help us to demystify that, to break it down, because I know you can do that for us. Data protection, privacy, and risk, for anybody that really want to understand what that's all about.
Yeah, thanks, Yemi. Uh, I would say that, I mean, maybe sort of to hit the nail on the head. I'm a GRC person, governance, risk, and compliance. That's it really for me. IT governance, risk, and compliance. But back to what I said, you'd find today that people are focused on just a single aspect. Maybe it's just governance, or maybe it's
Yes,
just risk, whether
risk.
or maybe it's just compliance. I mean, I've done all the three. Within my last role, I was mainly focused on risk, right? Which was sort of very puzzling for me, right? Because I mean, naturally you see the three being done together. But like I said, within the Western world, they're like specialized to role, right?
Yes.
You find someone doing only risk management, and that's everything they do. You find someone doing compliance, and even within compliance, there may be small areas. Maybe the person is just doing ISO standard, and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, he's not doing SOC 2, he's not doing some of the other compliance, right? So, I mean, I started off, I'm an IT GRC professional, but I think I'm also happy that you asked the question. At some point in time, I got tired of doing cybersecurity, and that's how I sort of moved into privacy and data protection. This was my very early phase when I was in uh, PwC, right? I felt like, you know what, I want to do something else. I got tired. I mean, not that I got tired of cybersecurity. I just felt like, you know what, it's becoming. I mean,
A
you
bread
do the
and
same
butter.
thing over and over again. You want sort of do, and also it's like my retirement plan. Right? In case security does not work, in case cybersecurity does not work, I mean, let me have something else like a plan B. So I delved into data protection and privacy. And these were the very early days, just before the release of the GDPR, General Data
Wow.
Protection Regulation. So I started reading the GDPR, took interest in that. PwC helped a lot because there was like a network of talented folks within PwC. So I mean, I could speak to people in PwC America, PwC UK, and the UK team had like a robust privacy team,
Hmm.
uh, which I sort of leveraged on in terms of understanding the ins and outs of data protection and privacy. So I do everything, right? I mean, if there's any work for me around business, please bring it. I'm happy to do governance, risk, compliance, and I think before then, so before transitioning into governance, risk, and compliance, I was heavily involved in technology itself. I think my first job, I was doing all sorts, identity and access management, provisioning access. I was provisioning access for one of the banks, provisioning access, doing firewall review. Firewall might probably be a very old technology right now. People don't talk about firewalls again.
It's still there, it's still there.
Yeah,
It's
I
still
mean,
there.
like there's no perimeter anymore, right? As in, people say there's no perimeter because I mean everything is sort of very interconnected now. So I was doing firewall review. I was using Cisco SA firewall back then, reviewing Cisco SA firewall. I don't know if that solution still exists today, but I
It's
was
still
doing.
there.
I got involved in a number of technology. I think that I mean for anyone listening, I think those, I mean, rolling up your sleeves and getting involved in using the actual technology, I think it provides some solid foundation for you when you decide that you want to sort of transition into the more management areas of security, whether it's GRC. I did some bit of vulnerability assessment and penetration test, but today, if you'd ask me, I can't write a code to save my life. I can run tools because they're like plug and play. But I mean, beyond that, I can't remember the last time maybe I wrote code. Uh, but things are also changing, which is why I'm also happy for the future. I mean, there's the concept of GRC engineering right now, which I feel like there are areas that are I mean, we'll need a lot of hands around getting to those areas, and I think it makes things easy when you look at the concept behind it around automating GRC, automating compliance, and risk management. I mean, the whole concept is called GRC engineering. I think those are like areas I feel like we'll need more hands. Definitely, maybe not people like me, where I feel like as in I'm about to retire, or I mean, something else.
Not yet.
Let me go off topic if I may. You mentioned privacy, which is an interesting area for us. And though your cybersecurity and risk management, you said private is also some of your main key areas. You know about the Nigerian Data Protection Act.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think about that? And how does it compare to this? I know there's something in Canada as well. I can't recall the name right now, and that of GDPR. I want you to give like a quick review what you think about the act in Nigeria, how it compares to the GDPR, and out of the three, which of the three do you think is the strongest, or are we doing something good in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, not that I think so. I know so. I know we are doing something good. Before I left Nigeria, there was some delegation sent from the Council of Europe.
Mm.
Um Pat Walsh, I think that's the name of the guy. It was sent from Council of Europe, and they had some number of delegations, and we attempted drafting the first NDPR back then. I can't remember. This was my days in PwC. I can't remember. Sorry, I'm lost on the year.
No
So
worries.
uh, so we attempted that, but I think that some of the learnings from that is what transitioned into the actual NDPR, then now the Nigerian Data Protection Act. But I think it's going to be it would be difficult to sort of compare. Not by I mean difficult. I think it won't be appropriately perfect to inappropriate to compare. And the reason why I say that is this: the European Union, right, is the mother of data protection and privacy today in the world. They've been going at this for more than a decade, right? So you can't compare that mature market or that mature industry with Nigeria. As in, I think the whole effort around data protection and privacy in Nigeria started maybe say roughly give or take 3 to 4 years ago. So you can't compare that kind of industry or the environment with data protection in Europe or in the UK. I think it would be an unfair comparison, if you get what I'm saying.
Mm.
Right? That being said, I think we're headed towards the right direction, right? I mean, uh, the NITDA and also the act itself is sort of modeled after the GDPR. GDPR is the model of all data protection regulation. That's really the plain truth. Every data protection in any country today is modeled after the GDPR, whether it's the PIPEDA in Canada and there are a number of other regulations within each of the various provinces. I think there's one for Toronto, Ontario. There's also
Yeah.
one for Alberta.
Yeah.
So I think most of them are modeled after the GDPR. So the GDPR really is like the foundation. So if you think
Foundation.
of it like the ISO 27001 standard being like the foundation of most of the other cybersecurity
Security
frameworks, like
frameworks.
that.
Yeah.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's the way to think about it. But the GDPR is much more than that. But
Absolutely.
I think to be an unfair comparison, but I think we're doing great. I mean, I know that, I mean, like I said, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement, right? I mean, there are areas for improvement in terms of enforcement
Mm.
within the Nigerian market. And also, I think we also need to uh, uh, align with some of the other global initiatives around maybe the Convention 108 plus. We need to be a signatory to that because I feel like it would allow for things around uh, the transfer of data if we know that there are adequacy requirements around most of the African countries. So I think we are getting there. But of course, there's
Mm.
always room for improvements here.
Yeah. I remember Babs and I on one of our episodes we talked about data residency in Africa. Uh, that needs to be taken very seriously, and I'm happy because after as if they were looking at after our discussion, then the issue of enforcing the NDPR came into being. Like, oh, that's fantastic. We just talked about being able to manage the data privacy when it comes to Africa. Now I'll go. You mentioned something. Said, yeah, all of these things are changing. A lot of things are coming on. How do you, Nuruddin? Maybe we are looking into your script now. How do you stay on top of all of these changes? Two, if you look back to your younger Nuruddin and want to advise the younger Nuruddin that if you want to come into this environment, if you want to come into cybersecurity, where would you have started? And your advice would be good in that. So please, what are your, how do you learn, how do you stay on top? And how do you tell your young Nuruddin how to get into cybersecurity, data privacy, and what have you?
So learning and staying on top, I think this is one of the ways to do that, as in having this kind of conversation. I mean, having this discussion with you and also listening to some of things like this around the podcast and also some of the webinars around cybersecurity. I think that's one of the key areas where I try to stay on top. And I mean, I'll sort of recommend this for everyone. I mean, conversations as like this, even though they might seem like might not be very technical. You're not learning the actual technology by itself, but I think they spur you in the right direction, right? I mean, or they provide a bit of guidance in terms of what do you need to do or what do you need to know. So, I mean, doing this, listening to podcasts. I also have a number of people which I follow. I mean, these are like both in the mostly in the Western world, as in these are like folks that are. I mean, they trigger my thoughts around cybersecurity. They're like, there are better ways to do things, right? I'm a fan of Gartner. I mean, I'm not. I won't hide that. Even people don't like Gartner. Or people say trash about Gartner sometimes. I'm a fan of Gartner in terms of the way the advisories and the way they think, right? I mean, the thought leadership that comes out from there, it's brilliant. When you sit down and you reflect on them, they're just absolutely brilliant. I mean, I would say if you want to, I know they are sort of also very priced. Gartner conferences are like, they are like very, very nice.
Cutthroats.
I also attend conferences too, as in, I was in B-Sides Calgary last year. I presented there on data protection and privacy. So having those engagements, both technical conferences and also GRC conferences, I think those are the ways to go about it. Of course, you need to also read a lot, right? Take certification exams, even if you don't want to take, sort of still working together. Writing an exam every year was like the norm. I don't know about you
Yes.
guys, but I've stopped that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Now I take trainings and I don't feel bad if I don't write any certification. So I just take trainings. I'm like, no, it's fine. But back then, you must write like a certification every year.
I
And I'm
agree
sure
I
with
that
you.
think
if
you because we don't have space. The certification, if we
exactly,
list all our certifications here, there will be no space again. We
exactly,
just
I'm
have
sure
to
that you
keep
guys
them
have
high
topped some of
profile
those
ones,
certifications.
CSS, CSK.
Exactly. So I think and this is also goes back to your next question, Yemi, around of, I mean, what do you need to do? I think the way to sort of differentiate yourself from it, the market is becoming very big and huge, right? So you need to sort of differentiate yourself from every other person in the market. So I think one of the ways to do that is through certification. If I were to know what I know now, what I would have done difference would have started very early on. I have folks who I've worked with who started cybersecurity right from school, and I'm talking about days in their universities. There's one of the guy, and also let me say honorable mention to him, Rotimi Akinyele. He started cybersecurity right from the uni. He was doing pen testing actively right
Yes.
from university days, and that's how I got to meet him.
Yeah.
Right, as in
Yeah.
right now he's doing very, very well. So
He's a
what I would
legend
have
in the
done
UAE
differently
now.
was exactly, yeah. So I think a number of folks like that too, and that's where we sort of add. We started some initiative back then, where we tried to sort of bridge the gap. It's called Niger Sec Force or Niger Second. Was trying to sort of bridge the gap between folks in the industry and people are thinking about cybersecurity, and some of those things are happening. So, like Futa, for example, or Futo, they have like a cybersecurity course now. I have interacted with some of their HODs as part of the conferences. I think they are doing something great.
Mm,
So I think, I mean, anyone who is interested, I would say get into some of those courses. And also, there are a lot of available resources online today where you can sort of learn about cybersecurity. So don't wait till you finish from school.
yeah.
Start on get the knowledge, and I think those knowledge actually spur you to actually get some uh, to advance in the industry. I mean, you may probably get some openings, and you'll find people who are actually looking towards your knowledge and hoping that you can do some work for them. So, starting early on is something I would have given myself, and also specializing if that's what you really want to do. As
Mm,
in, if you want to digital forensics, focus on that
mm,
and know the ins and outs so that when you're waking up from sleep and you're asked any question around digital forensics, you can actually do it right from your sleep. As in, I think specializing would also be a great thing. And I think that's something we don't do enough in Nigeria. We are like
yes.
we know everything, but when it comes to
The depth.
the technical depth, I think sometimes it's always missing on us.
Mm,
I think for me, you mentioned some great things that even we were looking into. You mentioned, I think if I recall, you said some Niger Sec Force, and like I was telling you earlier, we are actually doing an event in Nigeria known as AfriHackBox, where we're bringing together the top 150. Again, 150 Nigerians that are able to hack, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced. Once you sign up, have the opportunity to test your skills. But more than that, it will be an ongoing platform after the event where people will be able to learn how to do ethical hacking, again, how to be mentored and how to progress in their field from an ethical hacking perspective. So I was very proud, and we'll definitely reach out to you for more to do with Nigeria Sec Force. Like
uh,
now that we know you're part of it, so makes it easier for us.
absolutely. And Nurdeen, before you retire, you will actually mentor some of these people. Definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we will bring you on board. We
I need a
want you to
mentorship
chat with.
myself.
Don't worry. We will use what you have first. Then you will also get a mentor. This is great. It is always good talking to people like you. And personally, I've learned a lot, especially some of the things you even throw around that I've been in the field for a while. I've not even heard about some of them. They mentioned a particular article that we need to sign. I'm like, okay, what is he talking about?
Exactly.
So, but this is a lightning, and we should find more way to be able to connect. And one of the things that also resonate with me is the fact that we need to bring on board some of our younger people who are specialized, or even we ourselves who are specialized, who can go deep dive into some area of technology or cybersecurity. And I'm happy to say, I don't know, Babs, please go ahead.
No, I just say thank you. Thank you for coming. I think, like OO said, you've given us an in-depth analysis on this topic, even gone beyond that because we moved over to privacy. And like OO said, you even said something regarding the data exchange that we need to sign with
So 108, sorry,
108.
108.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down. So yeah. So again, we for me personally, I just want to appreciate the fact that you were able to give us this much of your time and with our audience as well. But please, we're still gonna have to bring you again because I think there's more we need to talk to you about for our audience and subscribers. Definitely,
Mm.
you're definitely on our coming back hot list for sure. So
Definitely.
Thank,
I
thank you
mean,
so
I
much.
look forward to speaking to you guys. I think we barely scratched the surface of what we wanted to talk about. So, I
Agreed.
mean, yeah, I mean, it would be good sort of, like I said, it would be good sort of continue this conversation. I think there's still quite a lot to learn from you guys. I mean, you guys spent like a greater part of your years in Nigeria developing the industry, contributing to the industry. And of course, there are people back there that are also doing that right now. But I think there's a
Yeah.
need for that collaboration between folks who have been there, done that, and people who are actually currently doing it right now. So I think there's a need for that synergy. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think the focus really is around preserving the Nigerian cyberspace, or maybe think about it from Africa. And I mean, one person cannot do it. I mean, this is not the job for one person. I think there's a need for that collaborative effort in terms of, I mean, let's do this together. And the end of the day is really around preserving our common interest, which is really protecting our cyberspace in Nigeria or the rest of Africa. So I always have to sort of jump on board and continue the conversation.
Absolutely. And for the sake of our audience who wants to connect with you outside of this space, where can they find you?
It's on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, but I mean, I'm not active on Twitter. As in, you get
I
tired
know
of it.
that.
It's
I was
really on
about to
LinkedIn.
say that, like, oh, do you keep up?
But even on LinkedIn, I don't do anything much. I mean, it's just there, right? I mean, back then I used to sort of actively contribute to writing stuff. There was a time I started Quick and Dirty, basically around privacy and data protection. I call it Quick and Dirty, basically
Wow.
just some very short around upsetting people around privacy and data protection. Like, yeah, this is not how you should be doing privacy. But I also stopped that. I mean, I think right now it's really around focusing on some of the key things which you guys are mentioning, supporting people as much as possible.
Mhm.
Even though I don't like being called mentor, I feel like we learn from each other. So we are
Yeah.
basically mentoring each other. So I mean, that's the way I sort of approach it. So I support, provide support to the community, learn, focus on work because I mean that's what pays the bills.
Yeah.
But I'm particularly happy about what you guys are doing in terms of building the community, giving back to it. And what I'll just recommend is I think it's a collaborative effort, as in
Yeah.
reach out to people already doing this. Let's just have this collaborative arrangement to build. Yeah.
Yeah. You heard it from Nuru. Join, listen, learn from the community. And we also have a LinkedIn group. If you want to join, we'll put it down on the link. Just join and let's continue the conversation from there. And you can find Nurdeen on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much, Nurdeen. It was great having you around.
Thank you, Nurdeen. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Babz.
ladies and gentlemen, that was a great, great, great guest right there. I think without a doubt, our audience will be totally satisfied. And like I said, we definitely have to bring him back. We just scratched the surface. There's still more to talk about. I'm 100% sure, but I think this should be part one. We should
Yeah.
have part two, part three, part four.
I'm scratching right now to see how can we really make this to be so that all the audience can join in and ask people like Nuruddin real bunny questions based on them, not what we want to talk about as well. That would be a great one. I'm looking
You
forward
know
to
what?
that.
To all the subscribers, if you want us to have a live session, send us an email and ask for a live session. Subscribe, make a comment, and say you want a live session. And we'll do a live session with Nuruddin and we'll talk about cybersecurity, privacy, and risk management. And even further, go furthermore to talk about GRC. That's once you subscribe, you comment.
Great. It's good to have you all. See you on our next episode.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye.